what we're looking at here is the elevation plan of our rink floor. This is not the ice itself, but the concrete. What I'm going to show you is how wavy our concrete is and what these numbers mean. So what we got here is a bunch of numbers. These are in tenths of inches, I believe. Like for example, right here, this is 0.08, that's 0.07. So if you go to the key over here that I wrote down, 0.08 is 1 inch, 0.07 is 7/8. So how we read this is the lowest point in the rink is 0.00 inches, so that's flat. And our highest part of the rink is 0.11, which equals 1 inch and 3/8. So going to this map over here, this is the highest point right here at 0.11, so that's 1 inch and 3/8. Then our lowest point in the rink is over here, 0.00. So with those two numbers, we can see how the concrete fluctuates from high to low across the rink. Right there, we could tell, again, the lowest point's here and the highest points here, and all these numbers are in between. So how I color code is that anything under a 1/2 inch is blue, anything from a 1/2 inch to under 1 inch is red, and anything that's over 1 inch is a yellow. So how I kind of tend to think of this, that anything in the blue is what we consider level. Now when you're talking about supermarket floors, because this is all it is, this is the map of the concrete floor. And the concrete floor this looks like concrete floor. This has all these coolant tubes in it. And I'll go into another video about how all that works, but we're just focusing on the concrete floor right now. So you're talking about having a 1/2 inch wave from either end would consider to be, acceptable. Not ideal, but acceptable. So, but what we got here is 1 inch and 3/8 wave across the ice. To give you an idea what 1 inch and 3/8 is, I wrote this a long time ago on the wall. This is to scale, and I stuck my phone next to it so you could get a good indication what 1 inch and 3/8 is, or 0.11. Going to this color coding, I consider anything in the blue would be somewhat level concrete. So that's anything that's under a 1/2 inch. And anything in the red over here that we see, that's from basically a 1/2 inch to 1 inch above our lowest point right here. And if it's in the yellow, that means it's over 1 inch from this lowest point, because everything is referenced from this lowest point and the highest point. So if we reference the lowest point, anything in the yellow is 1 inch above, at least 1 inch to 1 inch and 3/8 above the lowest point. So I'm going to flip this around because this is how we look at it from the back Zamboni areas right here and the public skate areas right here, and these are the locker rooms along this way. So this is kind of how we see it. And if you look at a picture of and I'll get one here in a second. All right, I did an ice tap, and I'll do a video on that, how I drill the ice for thickness. But if you look at this right here, we have 3/4 of an inch. I put the red highlight on it so drivers know which the danger or thin areas are. So we got 3/4 of an inch there, we got 3/4 of an inch there, 7/8 and 7/8, 1 inch along here. Again, I'd like to see, 1 inch and 1/4 throughout the whole rink, but since we have all these waves in it, it's a little bit difficult. I also get into the ice minutes I do to try to keep the ice level, the cross cuts and the figure eights, keep the corners down. We'll get that to another video. But if you can see by, side to side here, you can tell, these spots right here is this spot, and this spot's kind of bad right here. It's also a bad spot, but right here where the Zamboni comes out, it kind of develops a ramp coming out. And I'd always do extra edging along here to try to get that ramp built down, but the ice seems to get thick up here. We don't have to worry about it too much, but right in here we do have a problem area every so often. Like right in this area right here, it gets thin every so often right there for some reason. Not just that spot, but when the whole area gets thin, that spot lightens up pretty hard, and that's because if you look right there, that one of the biggest numbers right there, if you look right there, one of the biggest number at 0.09, that's really high on the scale there, at 0.11 is being the highest. So I color coded this a number of years ago. I had this sheet for a long time, but I really didn't fully appreciate what was going on. When they, like here, when the ice is thin, it's not so much that the ice is thin, it's that the concrete rises up. So imagine where I'm at. So imagine this, if this is the ice here and this is the concrete on the bottom here. So if I wanted to keep 1 inch of ice over this spot, I'd have to keep 2 inches of ice over here. So, and water does somewhat self-level, but it's, you know, over 200 feet, it's not going to really self-level. So it's going to self-level locally, I should say. So there's a lot of maintenance we got to do, a lot of flooding we have to do. And I always got knocked because I always dumped too much water on the ice, especially early on when I really didn't know what was going on. I knew we had thin ice. I knew the ice got thin really quick. You can tell how the lines get bright, the paint gets brighter. I never quite understood why until I found this sheet and color coded it and started kind of like educating myself and the drivers and especially the customers. Now, you know, now I have something to point to. I'm going to look at this. Like, look at the concrete we have here. And we have to put extra water on the ice just to, you know, to keep ice on it. How thick should the ice be? Well, the ice should be, in an ideal situation, the ice should be about 1 inch thick. So trying to keep a sheet of ice maintained that has 1 3/8 wave in the concrete is rather difficult, especially the amount of use that we have. And it's very difficult sometimes because the rentals, you always want to rent the dead spaces we have to make money, and you never want to turn down money when it's there. However, scheduling ice maintenance is very important. So we do the best we can, laying water on the ice, making sure it's nice and thick. And I'll go in a separate video about edging and how we edge the rink and how the edging affects the level of the ice and how easy it is to cut the ice. I do notice with this rink, if we get our corners too thin, the rest of the rink goes with it, and that kind of pretty much makes sense if you understand the edging and how the edger works. So we got to do our best we can to try to keep water on the ice, try to keep it thick. You know, flooding the ice. You don't really want to go light on the blade and compromise the ice quality. Usually keep the blade the same and go heavier on the water, or drive a little slower, lay more water. Or late at night when there's open times, we flood the ice. Just go out there and drag the towel and flood the ice, just dump tons of water on it. And most of flooding, like I train my guys, happens between the circles. Basically this little zone right here is where most of our flooding happens. Especially in these areas right here and kind of towards the center of the rink and in front of the creases. And the goal really is to do enough ice maintenance during the day and the nights when we're not busy to try to get the ice thick enough so during the weekends you don't really have to worry about laying more water, because the more water you lay on it, the longer it takes to freeze. So there's situations where you just have to do a good cut and lay your water and get off. You don't have time to drive slow and dump a lot of water because there's rentals one after another. So we try to do our ice maintenance at night, in the mornings, during dead times, try to get thick enough so when we're busy, the guys don't have to worry about, oh, how thick the ice is, we gotta raise the blade up over here. Just a rule of thumb for me, I kind of always raise the blade up over this area. This is our big problem area, and right here along the player benches. So, and people have asked, can you just grind down the concrete? That's a good question. I think that with the rebar in there and the cooling tubes, you couldn't really grind down, you know, 1 inch of concrete to get down. I mean, you're talking about a new concrete slab right now to replace this. And one thing that stood out is when we take our ice out, there's a threshold we could pull out by the Zamboni door. We just let all the ice melt to water and just push out with squeegees. It takes about a little over a day to melt, especially during the summer. And it takes about 3 hours with squeegees, modified squeegees, I should say, to get all the water out. But that's an interesting time, because when you come in here, you can really see where the high spots are. Because as the water starts kind of slowly draining out, the water drains to the low spots, and the high spots, you know, you can see like certain areas, here, and here, like there's the concrete's coming up over the water. And these two circles right here, it really seems like the concrete dips down a little bit. Well, it doesn't so much dip down as these areas around it are higher. So yes, I guess it dips down. So these areas over the circles are always thick. The ice is always thick. It's really hard to see the face-off dots and the hash marks and stuff because the ice gets really thick. Again, it's not so much that the ice is thick. Yes, it is, but the concrete around it is higher, so it creates a low spot in these two areas. Try to shave this area down to keep it thin, but then the rest of the rink starts getting thin with it. Our ideal ice thickness, I'd say, is about 1.5 inches. Now it allows, the ice is like a living beast. It gets thick and thin as the days and weeks go on. As it gets used, it gets a little bit thinner, and as it as we build up, it gets thicker. To keep 1.5 inches of ice there allows us, like over a busy weekend, if we have 2 junior games and 2 university games, a bunch of minor hockey games, that allows us enough buffer zone to have a busy weekend, maybe lose a little bit of the ice and still have enough ice over the areas that are high, so we're not skating into concrete. It's somewhat unfortunate. The guy built on his own dollar, so I mean, yeah, we could knock the guy all we want, but he got the place built. It's here. And that's a little bit about our concrete and why we put a little bit too much water on our ice. It seems like we're just dumping water indiscriminately and not knowing what we're doing, but there's a reason behind it. You know, there's a method to our madness. We tell the guys what's going on, like, you know, telling people the concrete's not very level. We have high spots on the concrete. Most people now kind of know what's going on here. Early on, no one really knew what was going on. I was just dumping water just because, you know I need to dump water because the ice gets thin. Too often you get a overzealous Zamboni driver, and I take a few days off and I come back and find half my rink in the back in the snow pile. He gets all happy and shaves off the ice. You got to be a little bit more thoughtful here and look at the ice and read the ice and see if the lines are looking really bright. We do ice taps. We drill the ice during the busy season once a week, during the off season maybe once a month. But I could really tell the ice. Personally, I could see the ice from the top of the Zamboni. I could look down and say, "Ooh." I could come in after a weekend off or a couple of days off and be like, "Whoa." How do we know? I don't have to get the drought to know that it's pretty bad. All right, that's a little bit about our concrete and what we have to go through to try and keep enough ice on it so we don't skid into the concrete. So I hope you guys found that exciting like I did. So yeah, again, thanks for watching, and like the local Iceman says, stay cool.